You ever get affected by merchandising as a kid?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Are there specific films where you think, yeah, that film got me? I bought into the thing they were selling.
Well, no, let me change them. Let me shift that a little bit. I would say that there were films that I was introduced to through the merchandising.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think that's just as effective merchandising, right? It's a different avenue to get you on board. Even if you never watched the film, you've already spent the money, right? It's just like it's expanding the IP.
Yes.
I had a Beetlejuice toy.
Yeah.
Years before I ever saw Beetlejuice. I got a Beetlejuice toy when I was like 4. I don't think I saw Beetlejuice until I was 12.
Yeah. I think the first film I remember it having an effect on me was The Lion King. And it was something so simple as I went into a grocery store and they just had a giant stuffed animal lion from The Lion King hanging up. And it was like this drawing where you just put your name in. And if you won, you won. And I didn't really care what the film was. For whatever reason, I saw that giant stuffed animal. I'm like, man, that's cool. I got to see what that's about. And then it ended up being Lion King. So it was pretty rewarding in the end.
What about all the tie-ins with fast food? I mean, I think the only Transformer toy that I ever had was from McDonald's. I never actually had a Transformer toy.
Yeah.
Now, this is an interesting thing too, right? Because which came first, the Transformers toys or the Transformers animated series?
Yeah, same with G.I. Joes.
I'm pretty sure it was the toy.
Yeah.
Right? And then the toy was popular enough, let's make a TV show. But then the Transformer toy that I got was in support of the TV show, and I got it as a free toy and a Happy Meal.
Yeah.
So that's this weird, that's sort of like toy passed through a show from which the show originated the toy, and now it's a new toy from the show. It's crazy.
The big one that affected me like that, I think, was Pokemon, which is a strange one because it started out as a Game Boy video game that Nintendo introduced. Then it either became a TV show or a card game. And I came to it through the card game. I saw other kids were trading the Pokemon cards.
Yeah.
And so I came into it through that. And then I found out about the show, and then I got a Game Boy specifically so I could buy the game.
Whoa. Okay. I did not know this about you. So you got a Game Boy for Pokemon.
Yes. Pokemon Blue.
Wow.
Yeah, I bought into that. And there are a few Pokemon films too, but those are peripheral. That's sort of something that feels like it does start with a video game and then it becomes a movie, but it's way more than that. You know, it's reaching all different forms of media.
Yeah.
One film in particular that was pushed hard in the 90s when it came to merchandising was Space Jam. And I came to Space Jam through the toys. I went to a Target one day, and on the end aisles, they had a Looney Tunes character, and the villains on that in that movie were called Monstars. They were these aliens who could play basketball really well because they stole the powers from various basketball players on Earth. And when you bought the set, you would get 2 toys in one. It wasn't just that you got one action figure with it. That was how I got into it. That was before the movie had even come out. I saw these toys and I'm like, that looks cool. I want that. And then on top of that, you've got the soundtrack that came out for it. I don't know if you remember how big the Space Jam soundtrack was, but that Quad City DJs, I Believe I Can Fly, that soundtrack was huge in the 90s.
I wish that they had made action figures for Kramer versus Kramer. That would have been great.
Yeah, action figures for Sophie's Choice.
Oh, that's gross.
This is why you work in an industrial laundromat.
Pull your head out of your ass.
Okay, sorry.
Welcome back. I'm Joey Z, once again with you. We are reporting live from what I'll call the battered spine of resistance.
Mm-hmm. In Wisconsin, the state of Wisconsin.
Well, be careful.
We're somewhere in that region.
We're somewhere.
You'll never know. We'll get the radio tower down before you find us.
That's right.
Jerry Novak.
Bringing you this broadcast once again. Now, we told you it may be a little more sporadic, but you will continue hearing this broadcast from us.
We're sorry it's been a month. It may be another month till our next broadcast, but this is what it is.
We've been
dodging some patrols. Mm-hmm.
There have been a couple of close calls.
Some CIA agents under the thumb of an unnamed Sheboygan Chamber of Commerce chairman who will remain unnamed.
Here we are again. Jimmy, good to see you again.
You're Joey Z.
Well, that's true.
I'm Jimmy Dantes.
That's right.
We're here coming to you from this long road, home alone.
Yeah, I think what we can safely say is we are on the long road home alone, more literally than perhaps we've ever been.
Yes.
And we're here to bring you the truth.
What are we talking about today?
Well, Home Alone is a film, 1990. Mm-hmm. Now, here's the thing. It's not only a film. It's also, and I want you to listen closely, a novelization. A novelization. Now, you may have heard the word novel.
A novelization? What's that?
I'm so glad you asked. Novelization is, and before I define that, would we call this a junior novelization?
That's actually something that I have been wrestling with in preparation for this broadcast, because you read Jurassic Park, there is a junior novelization of that. And I feel like when it's a film that is G or PG, when it's a novelization, I don't think the junior applies because it's assumed it's for kids already. Right. Whereas Jurassic Park, some parents might be, maybe that's a little too scary for my little 6-year-old or whatever. But when you say junior novelization, we're going to pull out all of the gore, all of the profanity, all of the chaos theory. That's all gone. It's just dinosaurs and fun now.
Right. We're going to put some glossy full color photos in the middle of this thing.
Yeah.
You know, when Muldoon dies, it's going to be in a very PG sort of way.
The one guy's still going to get...
Muldoon went.
Which one was that? The raptor guy? I mostly just remember
the hat.
I remember the toilet dude, because the dinosaur just goes down and grabs him off the toilet and shakes him. That's a pretty funny death.
Yeah. Hilarious.
I thought it was pretty funny.
Okay. So I think you're right. I don't think that we need to, it may be a little redundant to call the novelization of Home Alone a junior novelization.
It is a novelization.
It's a novelization. Now, a novelization is this concept. I think it originated in like the 60s or the 70s.
The silent era, actually.
Really? Even before that?
Yeah, even King Kong from the 1930s had a novelization as well. Yeah.
So this is conceptually, imagine now, of course, we grew up in an era, and we're no spring chickens ourselves, but we grew up in an era recently enough that when you liked a film, you could buy it on home video.
Yeah. Home entertainment was a common thing. You could get it pretty cheap. It was pretty common for most houses to have their own VHS or DVD collection.
Right. Yeah. Now imagine before that, before you were able to watch a movie on demand in any sort of way, you saw a film in the theater, you loved it. It's ephemeral. Right? It's gone. Maybe if you really like it, you go to the cinema as many times as you can during its first run.
Yeah.
Right. You see it a bunch of times.
This was a thing back then, too, is that films ran as long as they were popular, which is why Home Alone was in theaters for weeks, because audiences just kept wanting to go back and see it, because once it leaves theaters, that's it. It's done. You don't get to see it anymore unless you're super rich and have like 16 or 16 millimeter prints, or a Betamax or a home entertainment system, which were a pretty penny back in the 70s and 80s.
Right. So say you want to relive Star Wars or Alien. Mm-hmm. Well, there was this little concept of the novelization, which is a book, a novel that's based on the movie.
Yes.
So rather than needing to rely on these scant memories alone to revisit a movie that you love, here's the novelization in paperback, and you can revisit the story.
Yes. And something to note about novelizations, they are often based on an earlier version of the script, something that was produced before they shot the film, because the idea is for the novelist to turn that early version of a script rather not into a film, but instead into an expanded version of the script, a novelization of it. But it's still like them using the screenplay as the building blocks, the foundation for their story. And they often have to add details to fill in the space, create a sort of picture in the reader's minds. But the thing to keep in mind is that they are always working with an earlier version of the script, more often than not, anyway.
Right. Because importantly, for merchandising reasons, that novelization needs to be released simultaneously with the film.
When Home Alone comes out, that book should be in grocery stores and people should be able to grab it. They go and see that movie. If they don't want to pay the ticket price for it again, they can buy the novel, and now they own it. Now they can read it. Anytime they want to go back to Home Alone, they can read the novelization, and that's how they relive it in their minds.
Now, imagine being the author of a novelization and how difficult and thankless of a job this is, right? Mm-hmm. You have never seen the movie.
Yeah.
You've read what you hope is a version of the script that's really close to what the final edited version of the film, of the released film, is like.
Yes.
But you're only given what the studio gives you.
Yes.
You don't know how accurate it is. You don't know. You may not even know who, if it's famous actors who are portraying these characters, you may not even know yet.
Yeah.
Who's in this movie.
Yeah.
If it's a visual film, if it's a science fiction film, you don't know what these things look like.
Yeah.
And you also don't know so a screenplay on the page, right? A good director and good actors really breathe life into a screenplay. You can read the screenplay of a film you love and find the screenplay to be sort of drab.
Yes.
It's really this the imagination and
the screenplay
is energy and the emotion from the actors that really presents you with the feeling.
Yeah.
Of a story.
Yeah. And I think the screenplay is more of a blueprint for what the story is, whereas the novelization really is trying to recreate it in a novelized form. So how that comes into play with Home Alone is that people often cite the novelization when they're looking for answers behind the scenes. The thing to take in mind is that that's not canon. There were later drafts of the script that led up to the film that changed things. And if you read the novelization, you can see the differences there. And so it really isn't canon. It's really just meant to vaguely relive the experience, but not to necessarily inform you more as to, what the film was beyond that.
I can't wait to find out if you have read the novelization of Home Alone.
I tell you what, after this break, I'm going to tell you if I have.
Can't wait.
Hey, you. Parlez-vous français yet, Squirt, huh?
My name's Kevin.
Your name's Kevin? You know what they're going to call you in France, don't you, huh?
No.
Yank!
So, Home Alone, the novelization, was written by Todd Strasser, who then went on to write, he's written a number of novelizations, the earliest of which, on my list anyway, is Ferris Bueller's Day Off. In addition to that, we have Home Alone 2, Home Alone 3, Rookie of the Year, The Page Master, Richie Rich, and The Good Son.
Wow.
And this is where the junior novelization conversation comes into play here. Is the novelization for The Good Son, do you think that's a junior novelization? Should there be a junior novelization for The Good Son?
There should not. Now, it's interesting. He really got in on the Macaulay Culkin IP novelization train.
Well, you've got that. You've got John Hughes as well, because of Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And then in connection to John Hughes Daniel Stern, Rookie of the Year. Yeah. And then I don't know where Page Master fits into that.
Macaulay Culkin.
And John Hughes was attached to Richie Rich too. He wasn't involved in the production of it, but I think some of his studios
They did shoot it in Chicago.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
You were going to tell us if you've read the novelization of Home Alone.
I have. I just finished reading it for the 17th time this morning.
Wow.
And holy cow is what's on the cover.
Holy cow is what's on the cover.
That expression is not said once during the film or the novelization. You would have thought they would have pulled one of his, I don't know, bigger lines. I guess I can't think of any right now. He doesn't say cowabunga or something like that.
Big horse's ass. Now, but this is a great place to start, I think, because this is a great foray into what are the differences about a novelization?
Yeah.
What do we learn?
Yeah.
about the story. What feels like it's not accurate, what plays like it's fanfic, and what actually feels like it maybe helps us understand the story a little bit more.
I think the scene that struck me the most when reading it was towards the beginning, actually. It's a scene before you even see Kevin in the film. The first time you see Kevin in the film, he goes up to his parents' bedroom. Uncle Frank won't let me watch the movie, but the big kids can. The book includes a scene where Frank says that Kevin can't watch the movie with him. And I thought that this scene actually said a lot about both characters, because it starts out with Uncle Frank calling Kevin into the room to ask him to fix the VCR for him. And Kevin just makes fun of Uncle Frank. Yeah. Just like, what's wrong with you? You're an old man. How do you, I can operate this thing and you can't. And Uncle Frank is not having it. He's really upset.
Uncle Frank is like, why don't you have a job or something like that? And he's like, because I'm a kid. Kids don't have jobs.
Yes. So like Kevin fixes the movie for him. Also, Heather and Tracy are in the room. Those are the big kids that he's referring to.
They're laughing with Kevin
at Uncle Frank. Uncle Frank is embarrassed by it. And so you really have this like struggle between Kevin and Uncle Frank from the beginning, which Kevin kind of starts. Uncle Frank is just asking him for help.
They're adversarial with each other. They have a history. Mm-hmm. Uncle Frank has treated Kevin like junk before, and Kevin is coming out of the gates with it.
And so basically Kevin is enamored with the fact that Uncle Frank brought this movie from Ohio, it says, this black and white gangster film, and Kevin had never seen a black and white film before.
Yeah.
And so he really wanted to check it out. And Uncle Frank was still so burned by Kevin making him look like a fool in front of Heather and Tracy that he said, no, get out of here. This movie's not for little kids.
Yeah.
You can't be here anymore. So that's why he gets sent out of the room. And then Kevin goes upstairs and basically pouts to his parents.
Yeah.
The other instance also related to Uncle Frank, where I thought the book was a lot more severe than the movie was, is the pizza scene. Kevin walks into the kitchen and Uncle Frank is still miffed about it. And I don't know if you remember this, but during the deleted scenes episode, we talked about when Uncle Frank does the yank prank on Kevin.
Yank prank.
You know what the French are going to call you, Kevin? Yank. And then he yanks Kevin's pants down.
He pantses Kevin.
And shows his boxer shorts. In the movie, in the deleted scenes, he does this in a hallway upstairs.
Just the two of them.
In the book, it's in the kitchen in front of the entire family.
Right.
And so, they're really pushing that Kevin feeling downtrodden. Uncle Frank is a real jerk kind of thing in that scene. In general, those first few scenes, most of the characters feel a lot more aggressive. They feel like real jerks, even Kevin. In the first couple scenes, he's just, I really don't like this kid.
As I was reading it, I was thinking about the differences. And a big thing that sticks out to me is that, and this maybe plays back into, is this a novelization versus a junior novelization? The film, of course, we know is aimed at kids. It's a family film. It's rated PG. There's not really an age limit to who should or shouldn't see this film, but there is some coarse language in Home Alone.
Horse's ass.
Horse's if you were growing on my ass, right? What I noticed in the novelization is that not only is there no coarse language, but there's also really no reference to butts at all.
Yeah, actually, I remember that when, what is it? Before I pump your, somebody says keister at some point in the film.
Well, in Angels with Filthy Souls, get your ugly keister off my property.
That's right. He doesn't say keister.
He says like, get your ugly face.
That's right. Yeah.
Also, the other instance is when Buzz says, I wouldn't let you sleep in my room if you were growing on my arm. Yeah.
Growing on my arm. Oh, it feels so wrong having heard it so many times. If you were growing on my ass. But I came across this too. I was noticing those lines throughout the entire book. This is obviously being watered down so that kids can read this.
Being tamed.
This is something that like elementary school teachers could allow their students to read without getting into trouble.
Right.
That's something I hadn't really expected. I figured they would keep the language. It was PG. Kids kids could see it. Why can't they read it? But maybe that's not the case.
It's like a family will watch the film, but no adult outside of us is going to read the novelization, right? The novelization is exclusively for kids.
Yeah.
So I think a decision was made there.
Going back to the characters, I think being meaner in those opening scenes, there was one line that really struck me. And it isn't actually something she says to him, but it's an internal monologue line that Kate has at the bottom of the stairs.
Yes.
And she basically says, how had this monster come into their family? There must have been some mistake at the hospitals. Babies were switched or something.
She can't believe
in her own mind
thoughts about her youngest child.
How had this monster come into our family? You know, pretty terrible thing. For the most part, though, I actually think the novelized version of Kate is a lot nicer than the movie version. She seems to, like, you can hear the internal monologues, her regrets. She understands she's asking too much of strangers, and that doesn't necessarily come across in the movie as well as it does in the books. And right from the start,
we've talked before about how Catherine O'Hara does severe for comedic effect very well. And I think that this is a good example of, you haven't seen the film yet. You've only read the screenplay. You don't necessarily know that like overly severe is what's going to play best for this character.
Yes.
She's exasperated, but she's a little more apologetic.
Yes.
I think. I do want to point out, at some point when we first meet Kate, the novelization says that Kate looked like a character from Dynasty.
Yes.
And I want to say, who is this book for? Really? 8-year-olds? I mean, even in 1990, were kids watching Dynasty?
I actually had to look. When I saw Dynasty, I had to look it up, and it was a rival show. It was a rival soap opera to Dallas, which is another soap opera I don't know. I had no idea what Dynasty was, but I know what Dallas is, and I know what that represents in American culture. Something that did strike me about the novelization is that anytime soda is referenced, they actually use the word Pepsi. Pepsi is said a number of times throughout that novel. And the fact that this was an earlier version of the script and they still found a way, like, it's not soda, it's not cola, Pepsi. Anytime, like, if Fuller has too much Pepsi, he's going to wet the bed.
I noticed the same thing. There's more Pepsi product placement in the novelization than there is in the film. Notice that Kevin tacks on a six-pack
of Pepsi
to the pizza order, which actually inflates the total that he owes. Now he owes $14.80 instead of $11.80.
And he was considering just getting one can of Pepsi, and he's like, no, throw a six-pack in. I'm going to need 6 cans of Pepsi.
You gotta wonder, did the author of the novelization just really like discern this from the amount of Pepsi in the screenplay, in the version that he got, or was he instructed to product place Pepsi into the novelization?
I have to imagine that in the later stages, once they'd finished production and they knew Pepsi was going to be a part of the film, that was something. Just insert Pepsi in there as many times as you can, and that's it. One other thing I noticed, talking about characters being meaner, Uncle Frank not only pantses Kevin in the kitchen, but then after the line that says, like, Fuller, go easy on the Pepsi, Uncle Frank refills Fuller's Pepsi.
I missed that.
Knowing that Kevin is going to sleep with him, and that Pepsi specifically makes Fuller wet the bed.
Yeah, Frank is less ornery and more cruel.
Yeah, he is a real jerk in the novelization. Yeah,
we even get Peter on the flight. We get Peter in his own head thinking, "Boy, my brother is an idiot or a jerk or something like that."
Yep.
One thing that popped up to me, I guess I have a few questions for you. Where do you land on some of these things? One thing I noticed was every single time Leslie speaks,
she squeaks.
She squeaks. The verb he uses is squeaks.
Yes.
And
every single time without fail.
Every single time.
Yes.
Every other character says or exclaims or whatever.
Shouts. Aunt
Leslie is always squeaking. Now, one, we know that Aunt Leslie does not squeak in the film. She has a very buttery voice. Mm-hmm. The author not knowing this yet, what the hell? Why? That really drove me crazy about this.
It didn't bother me that her voice squeaked. It's that it's called out every time that she speaks.
That's what I mean.
And it's like, like you call out that Uncle Frank is pudgy or whatever at the beginning. Yeah. But like every time he shows up,
you don't belabor it.
Yeah. Like you don't need to know that he's pudgy every time he enters a scene.
Yeah.
That always bothered me too. I thought maybe it was just a way of like making her seem a little more irritating to Kevin or something. Just one little trait to make her seem more unlikable, but I don't know. I didn't really care for it. I think the other two big differences in the book compared to the movie are how we treat the Wet Bandits and how we treat Old Man Marley. The Wet Bandits in particular are not called the Wet Bandits in the novelization because that was something improv by Daniel Stern.
I did not clock that.
Yeah. You don't see any flooding basements because at the end of the movie, Kevin doesn't go to the Murphy's house. He goes to Old Man Marley's house instead. And that's something like over the course of the film, Old Man Marley is a little more friendly in the book than I think he is in the movie.
He is. That's actually a big difference, is that Marley keeps trying to talk to Kevin.
Yeah,
he keeps trying to connect with him in their early interactions.
He's not a ghoul. Kevin comes out, says, "I'm not afraid anymore," and Old Man Marley's like, "All right, great, good for you, kid."
Yeah,
when he shows up at the pharmacy, he doesn't just stare at him like a zombie.
Right.
He says, "My hand is bloody because I cut it on a shovel, so you don't need to worry." Yeah. And then when he meets him at the church, Old Man Marley's like, "You're clearly afraid of me because of things people have been saying, but you don't need to be scared of me, okay?" Yeah. And then they basically have the same conversation they have in the movie.
Right. Whereas, of course, in the movie, deep into the film at this point, it's the first time we ever hear Roberts Blossom's voice.
Yeah, he doesn't speak at all before the church scene. And he's in the book, he said a few things to Kevin beforehand.
Every time they see each other, he's trying to connect. He seems like a friendly guy. Yeah. That's a big difference.
Yeah. And then when you get to Old Man Marley's house, Kevin, instead of going to the Murphys, he goes to Old Man Marley's house and he has to go into the basement. And he's scared that the dead bodies are down in the basement. Yeah. He goes down there, finds out they're not there. And then he comes up and the Wet Bandits have cornered him there, but they didn't realize Old Man Marley's still home, and he taps them on the shoulder and then bonks them on the head at his own house.
Right. There is an irony there, because the thing that they point out that we've talked about this before, but is never acknowledged in the film. We've wondered, do the Wet Bandits know that Marley is also home for the holidays? And it actually says this explicitly in the novelization, that the Wet Bandits have clocked Marley and they know that he and only he will be around. And they've sort of considered him like a non-entity.
Yeah, they have considered that we don't want him to see our van. We don't want to be within eyesight of him, but he's there and he's a weirdo and we gotta be aware of him. I don't think at the end of the film, I don't think they're even registering that it's Old Man Marley's house. They just see Kevin going there and they're so banged up and beat up that they're so enraged. There's so much violence used in the language towards what they're going to do to Kevin. They're going to turn him into hamburger. They're going to boil him in oil. It's just the line from the sequel is actually in the novelization. "I'm going to murder that kid." Yeah. I think they pulled that from the novel. Yeah. Anyway. But so Kevin gets to the top of the stairs. The Wet Bandits are there. Old Man Marley bonks them on the head. And different from the film, Old Man Marley and Kevin both interact with the police.
Yeah. Right? They have an interact. He goes, "I got pretty good aim, huh?" Or something like that. And Kevin's like, "Yeah, I would say you do." They're bosom buddies now.
Yeah. And then Kevin says, "I've been watching these guys and I'm pretty sure they broke into some of these houses. So you might want to check out and see if some of these houses have been broken into."
Right.
And then Old Man Marley takes him home, I think. So, yeah.
Now, here's something else. Another big difference. This is a random detail that has changed. I wonder what you think of this. So Kate ends up flying from Boston to Detroit.
Yes.
So this is arbitrary. I don't see how this makes any real difference, but it really is explained or described with some specificity in the novelization, where it's like she flies into Boston, then she flies into Detroit. She's supposed to fly from Detroit to Chicago, but there's a huge snowstorm over the Great Lakes. And they say now Gus Polinski and the Kenosha Kickers are driving from Detroit to Wisconsin, but it's going to take a long time because of the snowstorm.
That's right.
It's also not a van. It's not a budget van. It's a station wagon. Do we think that that's just an earlier version of the script?
Yes, it is. Because I've read an earlier version of the script, and I remember specifically that Kate doesn't go to Dallas. She goes to Boston, and then from there, she has a layover to Detroit. And I think her intention was to maybe get a rental car from Detroit and drive there.
And then, like, I think the Kenosha Kickers have gotten the last one.
They got the last station wagon. She's berating the ticket agent. And one thing I noticed in her inner monologue is that she understands she's being outrageous. And when Gus Polinski taps her on the back, she actually expects that it's security because she's just become unhinged.
Right. Yeah.
And then, Gus Polinski's like, hey, I overheard you got a problem. We can all go into the station wagon, and it's going to be a slow haul, so we're not going to get there till tomorrow morning, but we'll do it.
Now, the funny thing about this, of course, is that we see very little of Gus Polinski, right?
Yes.
We don't get all of this information about like who the Kenosha Kickers are, and that's a really nice reminder. When we go back, when we watch Home Alone, we watch this scene with John Candy. It's a really nice, refreshing reminder that everything in that scene is improvised by the late, great John Candy.
Yeah.
I think the script had very little, and I think John Hughes, knowing that this is probably going to be John Candy and knowing John Candy well, was like, well, we can go pretty light on the scripting.
Yes.
Here.
Just let him do what he wants.
Just let him do what he wants.
I mean, they were really good friends.
Yeah.
To the point where I think John Hughes even considered John Candy to be one of his muses. Yeah.
If you have to get to Chicago, we'll gladly drive you. It's on the way to Milwaukee.
You'd give me a ride?
Sure we will. Why not? You know, you got to get home and see your kid.
A ride to Chicago?
Sure. You know, it's Christmas time.
One other scene we get in the book that isn't in the movie is Kate and Gus Polinski saying goodbye to each other. Gus dropping her off at the front of the house. He pulls into the driveway, and Kate is just so thankful. You know, how could I ever, repay you for this? And Gus just says, just buy one of our albums and you'll be like the first one in Oak Park who's done it, and that'll mean something to us. They also point out what the name of the album is.
Right. It's
I Don't Want Her, You Can Take Her. She Can't Stuff the Kielbasa Polka.
That's pretty filthy.
What is that? It's a play on like, I don't want her. She's too
fat for me.
That's
I don't want her. You can take her. She's too fat for me, which is a polka song.
That's right. Oh, I didn't realize that was a polka song either. That's funny.
It's a classic polka song.
Oh, okay.
We'll find this in our travels. We'll swing by a record store and we'll find it.
We'll listen to more polka.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Well, we got to do something.
I did think that ending was pretty endearing for them, though. I thought it was nice seeing them say goodbye to each other. And anyway.
I did too. I thought that was a nice little touch. It's one of the very few things in the novelization where I felt like that was some closure, some heart that I think the movie could have used.
Yeah. One other thing, when you talk about heart missing from the film, I think something was missing from the book. The Ed and Irene scene at the airport. It doesn't go the way that it does in the movie.
Right.
So Ed and Irene are the old couple that Kate manages to convince to give her their tickets back to the States. In the movie, they are actually convinced. She seems so desperate, and they're so sympathetic. Yeah, all right. And then that's how she gets her ticket. That does not happen in the book. They have direct flights to Chicago, and they just get on the plane after hearing everything she's offered, and they get back on the plane, and Ed and Irene do not save Kate, and she ends up just sleeping at the airport until one of her flights on standby calls her up, and they're like, okay, you can go to Boston and we'll get you to Detroit.
Right.
One thing I also wanted to point out about Ed and Irene is wearing a Cubs hat and Ed is wearing a White Sox hat. What's that about? Is that a common thing?
North side, south side.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know. They're Chicagoans, but they're rooting for. I mean, the Cubs and the White Sox are very, you can't say definitively, but overwhelmingly for Chicagoans, that is a geographical line, right? If you're a North Sider, you're a Cubs fan. All right. If you're a South Sider, you're a White Sox fan.
So maybe Irene grew up on one side of the city, Ed grew up on the other, and they came together. Opposites attract.
And you got to love it, right? Sometimes in New York, you'll meet a Yankee fan and a Mets fan. They get married. It's cute, right? It's like, well, we saw beyond our differences.
Yeah. I think the other big thing we need to talk about with the novelization is how much of it hinges on that toothbrush scene at the pharmacy. It is that Kevin stealing a toothbrush in the novelization comes up so much more than it does in the movie. Kevin is dreading the fact that he's now a criminal and the police are after him.
It really authenticates something that we figured out, I think, in a previous season.
Yes.
We sort of sussed out from the subtext, but it really delivers it here in the novelization. We see inside of Kevin's thoughts. He's like, I'm a criminal.
Yes.
I'm as bad as these bandits who are trying to rob my house.
That's the hilarious thing too, is that the first time that he sees the wet bandits in their van, they're backing out of the Benson's house.
Right.
We do not hear about the Bensons in the movies, but there is
named neighbor. They live next to Marley.
Another family on Lincoln Boulevard. That's not what it's called in the book. I think it's like Revard or some crap like that.
Different. But they're in Oak Park. They're not even in Winnetka. So
the Benson families in general too, they're all B names. It was Bill. Okay. Yeah. So that's how the wet bandits hear about Peter being in Paris, is that they call the Bensons and the Bensons, not the Murphys. The Bensons answering machine says Bill, Betsy, Bonnie, and Barry. All of the Bensons have B names. Anyway, they're backing out of the Benson's house, almost hit Kevin, and Kevin sees Harry and says, that guy's a cop. And he's in plain clothes. He's undercover looking for me. Yes,
exactly.
And Kevin's in disguise outside. He put on a different hat so he wouldn't look like the same kid, but he still thinks those are cops looking for him. And he dreads that throughout the entire film. He even considers not calling the police at the end of the film because he's a thief. And he ultimately realizes, I can't beat these guys totally without the police, so I'm just gonna have to face the music.
I might have to spend a night in jail myself.
But they're gonna save me. And that's not really called out in the film much at all. The most you get from it is Kevin walking home and saying, I'm a criminal, as he looks down at his toothbrush.
Right.
And throughout the book, it's about like the last half of it that he's at least referencing being a criminal for the every other page.
Now, did I miss the part? I'll be honest. I read this, we'll say, breezily. Did I miss the part where Kevin prepared all the traps?
I think it happens between scenes.
Yeah.
You don't really
see it. It's a montage in the film, right?
Yeah.
But it's an important montage in the film. And we get that sweeping John Williams score.
Yes.
There's a lot of buildup right there to the third act.
Yeah. I think how it works in the book is you get that line from Kevin where he says, this is my house. No, actually, now that I think about it, this is my house. I have to defend it happens before when he sets up the house party.
Right. And it's earlier on.
That's also something that happens in conjunction with the pizza boy. He preps the Angels with Filthy Souls gag on the pizza boy the same night that he knows the wet bandits are coming to take the house. And he sets up the house party to deter them.
Right. He congratulates himself on having convinced the pizza boy that he isn't home alone.
Yes.
And I think that also draws a direct correlation to, I'm not just doing this to be a punk.
Yeah.
I'm really testing out the legitimacy of this.
If it'll
prank.
work, if it can actually scare adults.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a proof of concept.
Yes. You don't really see a sequence where he's preparing the traps. It really is just he gets home and then I think he starts setting them and then he's eating dinner and then the clock chimes 9 and the wet bandits start to enter. They reuse the blowtorch and for the most part, it feels like the end sequence is pretty much identical to the film, apart from the fact that there's no charcoal starter. It's just the blowtorch is used twice. He heats up the doorknob and then he jury rigs it to the back door so that it burns Harry's scalp once he's gone back there.
Right.
Which seems a little far-fetched to me.
They also tease up the blowtorch in the setup too. So instead of the glue gun,
he was playing with the glue gun in the garage.
Right. In the book, he's playing with the blowtorch, which, come on, is a big difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
You had an 8-year-old playing with the blowtorch.
Yes.
Yeah.
Buzz showed him how to use it, it says. Yeah. And then Peter's, I don't know, a lot more angry about it than he was with the glue gun.
Yeah, well,
understandably so.
Rightfully so. Yeah.
The ending is sort of a little different. Kate comes home. She enters the door and Kevin's already gone downstairs. His family's not there and he's sad about it. He goes back upstairs and then Kate comes in and she's expecting the house to be a mess. It's going to be destroyed and it's not. There's a tree there, and it's a 2-foot tree. And then I think she pulls a bell off of it and then she rings it and Kevin hears it upstairs and she rings it again. And that's what draws Kevin back downstairs. And then it's the same as it is in the movie. The whole family's happy to be together. You get a little more with the siblings who feel bad about crapping on him earlier on in the story. And they're just so happy to see him now. And Buzz's room is not messed up.
That's true. There's no, what did you do to my room?
Nope. Old man Marley gets back together with his family. That's still part of it. But no, what did you do to my room?
And the end.
Happy ending.
So I think really when we're talking about the novelization of this film, there's some things, obviously you wouldn't read this by itself and think, wow, this is a great book.
Yes.
But I think as a supplemental material, it can be a little helpful to understand what's going on in characters' heads.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it's been enlightening to understand.
Well, I think if I had been a fan of the movie in the 90s and didn't have access to home video, I think I would have enjoyed being able to relive the experience, just reading it on the pages. And it's even probably a lengthier experience that way. You can, really get into the nitty gritty of it. So, yeah.
Hold on. We've just received something. Now listeners who are tuning in understand that we're sort of a plucky operation here. And we thank you for tuning in with us again as we've been able to get up the transmitters for this show.
Our pirate broadcast.
Our producers just handed us a note and whispered something to me. So I apologize for the abruptness of this, but it seems that we have received some sort of communique from the homeland.
Oh my goodness.
The front. Sheboygan. I don't see who this is from, but it says Bill Sikorsky is still alive.
Oh.
Still in coma. More news when possible. Novak consolidating agencies.
Well, it sounds like things are dark on the home front, but at least Bill Sikorsky's alive. Well, I think this only means that we need to keep going with this broadcast. We are the voice out there, the voice of reason, the only ones that are going to bring this injustice to justice, everything that's been going on with Jerry Novak. And, I think we should just continue to resist.
We've been on the road for a long time, and we know that it becomes incredibly difficult to carry on, but I feel that this is bigger than us.
Yeah.
We'll keep our ears and eyes open. Folks from the front line, whoever sent us this, thank you. We appreciate it. I'm sure at great personal risk, you've presented us with this information. From the long road of The Long Road Home Alone, The Long Road Home Alone Road Show. I think that's enough.
Yeah, holy cow.
Holy cow. Jimmy, thank you again for everything you do.
I'm so tired of Pop-Tarts.
Me too. But we only have like 16 left.
They have herringbone patterns on the underside. Did you notice that?
I did notice that.
Yeah.
There's not a lot to look at.
Yeah.
We will join you again as soon as we can. And I can't wait. This is what gets me up in the morning.
Don't change that dial for the next month. We'll be back.
Over and out.
Broadcast live from our studio in
Undisclosed location.
The Long Road Home Alone is hosted by Jimmy Dantes and Joey Z and produced by Pat Muldoon. Be sure to tune in next time. Don't forget your reading glasses and keep the change, you filthy animals.